Welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting. My name is Ryan Austin. I am the Public Works Committee Chairperson. We'll start with a quick roll, starting to my right. If you would, introduce yourselves, please.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Dean Veneman, Alderman, District 2.
Tom Rome, Alderman, District 4.
Matt Zacher, Alderman, District 3.
Patrick Delaney, Alderman, District 7.
Joe Eichstead, City Engineer.
Okay, with that, we'll call the meeting to order. The meeting is now called to order. Item number 2, review traffic control study report for the intersection of Apricot Street and 15th Street North. Mr. Eichstead.
All right. So we've got a few traffic studies tonight on the agenda. I'll just take a quick moment and just kind of run through kind of the basics of what we look at for traffic studies and what's involved. So with traffic control at intersections, it's based upon a hierarchy of control. And so we start out with no control, and then go to yield control, two-way stop, four-way stop, and then traffic signals thereafter. And so a lot of the traffic control studies tonight talk about stop signs, and we'll get into that a bit more as we go along. We do look at a variety of different things: the speed of the vehicles, the volume of traffic that's on the street. We look at any vision restrictions, existing conditions that related to property use adjacent to, upstream or downstream of the intersection. Look at traffic reports, traffic accident reports, and see what sort of accident history there's been and how that might be resolved with the proposed implementation of new traffic control. So specific to the Apricot and 15th Street intersection, there was a request to put a stop sign, or review the intersection to put a stop sign in on Apricot Street. The concern was primarily raised due to speed along Apricot Street, and which is often the case. We often get requests for stop signs to reduce speeds. And so with our review, we're always looking at the proper need for a certain level of traffic control at an intersection. And another term for that is warrants. Are two-way stops warranted or a four-way stop warranted? If they're warranted, they'll reduce the accidents, likely reduce the accidents. They'll properly notify drivers of their use of the right-of-way, who has the right-of-way. And then, if they're not properly warranted, they can actually cause increased speeds mid-block away from the intersection, and generally increase noncompliance with actually stopping at a stop sign. You get a lot of rolling stops and violations. And then, in addition, improperly warranted stop signs can actually increase accidents at intersections. So when we look through these, we're always, from an engineering perspective, and that's what we're providing our recommendations upon tonight, is the stop sign or this level of traffic control warranted at this particular intersection. And so back to Apricot 15th Street, we've got traffic counts, accident history. Based on everything that we've reviewed, there's no additional signage is recommended at this time. There's currently a stop sign on 15th at Apricot, and otherwise Apricot is I believe it's a collector street, so a through street all the way from, is it 1st Street, all the way up to 16th Street. So it's definitely a thoroughfare, but the traffic volumes are quite low. And if you've got your report handy, on the second page, there's a table that kind of a matrix that shows the different criteria, and this same matrix is repeats itself in all of these reports, but the red boxes identify where this particular intersection falls on that matrix. And so if any two of the 5 items under a particular traffic control are met, then, they'd be considered for a warrant or warranting a particular traffic control device. So at 15th and Apricot, 4 of the 5 are actually fall in the no control category. The two-way stop sign control for T intersection, that one is warranted there. So again, there's, at least from an engineering perspective, there's no additional signage that's recommended at this time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Zacher.
Can we know why this was recommended to be reviewed?
I'm not sure why, except for, there was a concern with speeds along
Speeds.
Apricot Street.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the city recommendations for no additional signage at the intersection of Apricot Street and 15th Street North.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, moving on to item number 3, review traffic control study report for the intersection of Chestnut Street and 12th Street South. Mr. Eggstead?
So this is this is right by St. Vincent School, located at the southeast quadrant of this intersection. 12th Street and Chestnut Street are both collector streets, so they both are meant to carry from an official street network planning effort. They're meant to be more thoroughfare type of streets. In this particular instance, of course, Chestnut Street is not controlled currently, and there's stop control on 12th Street. So there was a concern that to look at this intersection for the installation of stop signs on Chestnut Street. So we reviewed the accidents. There's a variety of different accidents. There's 3 of them that somewhat qualify for right angle collisions, and that's what we'd be looking at for benefits to putting in a 4-way stop or an all-way stop, as opposed to the 2 stop signs on 12th Street. In addition, vision restrictions. There's a power pole, but fairly wide open vision corners. There's not too much for obstructions there. We did do traffic counts, and we've got an 85th percentile speed, just over 30 miles per hour. It's posted for 25, and the 85th percentile speed is the speed at which the 85% of the drivers feel comfortable driving at that speed. So 32 is common for a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, at least our experience that we have. Let's see what else here. We did do physical observations on site to see if there were any pedestrians during that time frame, see where the school bus drop zone was, the parent drop off and pickup. So we took a school day. We went there in the morning at just before the start of school. Then in the afternoon at the end of school. We didn't observe any pedestrians at that time or either of those times on that day. We also paid attention to queuing of traffic on 12th Street to see if vehicles were backing up, having difficulty getting onto Chestnut Street. At most, there were 2 cars that were stopped and waiting, and otherwise there were no other observations that were made that were noteworthy. So with that, again, this is our recommendation, is that you know, you can see in the matrix there too, in that table, where the warrants kind of land. So that, again, at this time, there's no additional signage that's recommended at this particular intersection.
Thank you. It was requested by Alderperson Bemke to hold this particular item over to the next Public Works Committee meeting. He would like to get some involvement from the community. He has several members of the community that would like to speak on this subject. So I'd like to hold item number 3 over to next month's committee meeting. Joe, do we need to make a motion on that? No. Okay. Okay, moving on. Item number 4, review traffic control study report for the intersection of Sampson Street and Grove Ave. Mr. Eichstadt.
All right, we've got another two collector intersection, currently stop sign controlled on Grove Avenue. It's, I don't know how far away it is. It's maybe a block away from Grove Elementary School. There are school signs at this intersection for, you know, any students that are walking to or from school. The speed limit on Sampson Street is currently signed at 30 miles per hour, and it's 25 on Grove. Again, it's stop controlled on Grove. Since 2010, there's only been a total of 3 accidents recorded. 2 of those which were right angle type accidents. Again, the type of accidents that we're looking for with improving, reducing those accidents with the addition of an always stop. Vision corners, they were free and clear. Again, I think there was a power pole there, but other than that, traffic counts, the volumes of traffic, they're quite low. And the 85th percentile speed on Sampson Street, again, the through street, was 32 miles per hour. Based upon the matrix in our observations, you know, it's not warranted for a 4-way or all-way stop. And so that, our recommendation at this particular intersection, though, would include the addition of, it's a yellow plaque, that warning sign, and there's the last page of this particular report, there's an image that shows what we would propose to put in on Grove Avenue, just below the stop sign, so it would be a cross traffic does not stop. Sounds like that's part of the confusion, is that vehicle drivers approaching that intersection based upon the crosswalk painting and the signage that's there, that it feels like it should be an all-way stop. And so traffic that pulls up and stops and then decides to go doesn't realize that traffic on Sampson Street is actually not controlled and has the right of way. And so that's our recommendation for this intersection, is to add the cross traffic does not stop signs on Grove Avenue.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Delaney.
I'd like to speak to this. It is pretty close to Grove School, however, most of the traffic is going east-west. And I think that's a good idea. Short of putting in a 4-way stop there would be to alert drivers that it's just the cross traffic doesn't stop. Also, the speed limit on Sampson is 30 miles an hour, is that correct? Yeah. So they're not running crazy down that road, from what I understand. So I'm for this.
Is that a motion?
I don't know if there's going to be any other discussion about it, but I'll make a motion to approve the city's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the city's recommendation to remain a two-way stop but add cross-traffic does not stop signage. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll take it to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Excuse me a minute here. Okay, moving on. Item number 5, review the speed study report for Chestnut Street between Hill Street and 8th Street South. Mr. Eichstadt.
This is initially a referral from former Alderperson Kellogg to install centerline striping along Chestnut Street between Hill Street and 8th Street for the purpose of controlling vehicle speeds while pedestrians are present. So we initially reviewed this with the committee back in early 2020, and I'll kind of summarize it here. The one item that was missing the reason it stayed on the referral list was that we wanted to revisit it when school was in session, and so our latest report here includes that. We were out there doing speed counts the end of September into early October. And certainly school was in session, and so we've got some decent data there. So just a couple things with the centerline pavement marking. Primarily, it's not an effective means for controlling speeds. There's been studies on it that have proven that there may be some marginal benefit, but not anything that of any significance. Nothing that we could find, especially on a low-speed urban type roadway. In addition, when pedestrians are present, there's usually parked vehicles, maybe perhaps school buses, other activity going on at the school or at the adjacent businesses nearby or residential properties that further restrict the width of the street. And so with the restriction of the usable width of the street, vehicles that are used in the roadway, it looks narrower, feels narrower. There's a natural tendency to slow down, especially if vehicle drivers see pedestrians. If it's dark out, shadows underneath the lights, all those things would lend themselves to slowing the traffic down and making sure that things are safe. So the 85th percentile speed on the latest count was 31 miles per hour. It's currently signed for 25. There are no speed-related accidents, citations, or complaints. There were a variety of accidents that were recorded since 1994. Some of them involving parked vehicles, trying to either get into a parking spot or leave a parking spot. Let's see here. Any other detail that's pertinent to share? The conclusion of the study in 2020, even without school in session, was to not paint the center line. That would have little to no effect on the outcome of vehicle speeds, and that the recommendation was not to paint it. After the further study and review, that recommendation remains unchanged.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Terry.
One other item, and it's on the third page of the engineer's report. With parking on both sides of the street, especially west of Lincoln, the probability of traffic being over a double yellow to avoid parked cars and technically violating the law is high. That was also a factor in this review, that if you paint it double yellow, you're really not giving people much of a chance not to break the law. If they're gonna try to drive carefully through there, they're gonna, and if you've driven through there, you've been over the center line, and, if there's two cars coming, you obviously move where you need to be, but that was another important factor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Delaney?
On this one, are we, did you go over the options? I'm sorry. These 5 options here.
I didn't go over those, but that's a good point. I mean, if the issue is and desire is to control speeds, there are other options that are available. There's 5 options that are listed there. Option 1, request enhanced enforcement during high levels of pedestrian activity. Option 2, narrowing of the lanes. That's essentially what happens when there's parked vehicles there. Otherwise, it would be, striping the parking lanes. There's also different, in pavement type things that you could install, speed humps, cushions, speed tables, that would help to limit vehicle speeds as well. And then other pavement markings perhaps, such as slow or speed limit 25 miles per hour. And then, there's of course the flashing LEDs and radar displays that could be installed, but those come at a price tag as well. And based on the 85th percentile speed that we counted in 2 occasions, it falls right around the 31, 32 mile per hour range that we would typically see on a 25 mile an hour street.
So I'm for doing something such as 4 or 5, but I'd like to know what you guys think about this.
Is a study needed to kind of determine if we do decide that speed is the issue, which way we're going to go, like option 4, pavement markings, or option 5, speed limit signs with flashing LEDs? Is that kind of what you're looking for as far as direction, Mr. Eichstein?
We wouldn't need a study in order to do one of those options. I think, because as far as a recommendation as to which one, if we do any, certainly the 85th percentile speed, in my opinion, doesn't suggest that we have a incredible speed-related problem there, but certainly there are things that could be done, but they're all at a different price point, and the potential for the preferred outcome varies between them.
I think I would agree that something should be done to make sure that at least speed is being enforced in that area when there's high pedestrian traffic, obviously with school there. So just to pick out which particular item, I guess, I mean, is that typically something that council would decide, or wouldn't there be some kind of recommendation there?
I mean, the recommendation at this point would be not to put any pavement markings in, and then do the low hanging fruit first, which the radar display isn't, the radar trailer isn't necessarily listed here, but maybe under the enhanced enforcement, that could be put out there periodically. That has a interim, temporary effect on speeds. People see the speed pop up, and it gets moved around the city occasionally, and that may be a low-cost, easy solution to start with, and we could go back and look at some of the cost points for these. Certainly, pavement modifications would be costly, as would the flashing LED radar displays. That cost would range between $10,000 and $15,000.
Any other questions, Mr. Zacher?
So, having been through there a few times during the crazy times, like you were saying, Joe, you can't really drive fast I mean, you got people on each side, and then you're trying to sneak past each other to get past. And when all those cars are there, you wouldn't really see the slow down, flashing lights. Maybe you would see it over another car. If anything would work there, somehow just maybe some kind of school zone slow down like we do at every other school. I don't know if something like that is there already, but just some signs that say school zone slow down, something like that would, like you said, low hanging fruit to just get it out there. I don't know if you could paint it on the road, but that's not going to last very long, I wouldn't assume. So.
So can we agree that we'd like some type of signage there? Particularly school zone slow down. I don't see anything like that as an option, but that would be something that we could move on tonight in this particular issue?
We could. I mean, I could revisit and see what's currently signed out there and what options are available for signage. And
Okay.
bring those back to the committee.
Sounds great. I don't believe we'd have to make a motion to vote as far as the center line.
No, no action, doesn't, you can just take no action, and if there's a referral to bring this back to review or to report back on the existing signs and future discussion of considering modification of that, again, we can just note that for the referral list. We can just, for the purpose of the minutes, we can indicate that there was no action taken.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 6, consider approving a revision of the state municipal agreement for the West Jackson Street project. Mr. Eichstad.
I included the actual agreement in the packet. Tried to summarize it here for you. So basically, it's a housekeeping item for the DOT. As we got to final design, they want to make sure that the state municipal agreement was updated from a financial standpoint and have that amendment reviewed by the city and approved. So the additions to the state municipal agreement is for non-participating cost components at 100% local cost. So non-participating mean that state and federal dollars aren't included in that. Those components, that amount was nearly $96,000, primarily for three items. We've got sanitary and water valve adjustments, which the city crews will be primarily taking care of all of the underground improvements. But there's, from a constructability standpoint, the city crews will be well out of that project before the water valves and sanitary manholes need to be adjusted. And so it makes sense to have the contractor do that. That's approximately a $5,000 value, part of the $95,000 that's an addition. There's also unclassified excavation of water main. So there's a variety of existing water main on the project that's being removed, and that's I guess it conflicts with installation of storm sewer, which the contractor will be doing. So the unclassified excavation cost is about $10,000 and pay the contractor that as he comes across these existing pieces of water main that will otherwise be abandoned, that because they're in conflict, there's a cost there to remove it, dispose of it. And then the large cost item or cost component here is hazardous material. There's $71,000 of the $95,000 that's estimated for that item. It's primarily on the west end of the corridor near the expressway, and then the potential for hazardous material. If the contractor doesn't encounter it, there won't be costs accrued for that. And so there were 14 soil borings that were conducted in a phase 2.5 hazardous material investigation to try to find out where any hazardous material might be and what we're dealing with from type of hazardous material, and then to, what the extent of the quantities might be. And so these are initial estimates as best as we can gather at this time. And so again, that was about 71,000. The other addition that's included in the state municipal agreement is the street lighting category 0020 in the amount of $195,915. That's at 100% local cost. And then there's $104,818 identified for street lighting at a cost share of 80% state and 20% local share. Both of those cost components would be paid for by the electric utility. And so those were largely not identified in the initial agreement, and they're now being identified in this amendment. There are subtractions included in the amendment as well, which primarily is a decrease to the city's local portion. Initially, there was a $900,000 cost identified, and that's being reduced to $723,000. So it's about a $180,000 cost decrease directly to the city. Of course, water and lights portion has been identified, and we just covered that. But in summary, there's a net increase of $125,000 approximately, and we would recommend approving the revised state municipal agreement as presented, and the Public Works Construction Fund budget was approved for the 2022 budget. Already includes the costs for adequate funds to accommodate these modifications.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Delaney?
I have a question about the lighting. In some other cities, they're starting to do like this black lighting on some of their streets. For me personally, it's hard on the eyes when I'm driving with my lights on and the black lights are there. Is there a way to know what kind of lighting is going to be installed? Can we just do regular lighting in the city of Wisconsin Rapids?
So we do have the Waterworks and Lighting Commission's lighting standard specifications, and I can't remember what K value that the lights are at, but it's the level of whiteness. But they are LED. Not sure what wattage, but we've got that information. We could get that to you if you're
So they're
interested.
just going to be normal lights, right?
Yeah, very similar to what's on East Grand.
Okay.
There'll be the decorative and I guess West Grand, both of those.
And this project, it's been in the works for quite some time. So the roundabout was approved by committee, or the city engineered the roundabout at the one side. Has there been any accidents or anything without the roundabout?
At Fourth Avenue in Jackson Street, there have been. They're right angle accidents primarily. I'm not sure of the count and frequency of those, but again, that's information that we have available to us.
Oh, that's fine. I just want to know if there was any at all. Thanks.
Yeah, there are some.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
I make a motion to approve the revised state municipal agreement for West Jackson Street project.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Hearing none, go to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, moving on. Item number 7, review referral requesting direction to prioritize transportation utility efforts over special assessment administration. Mr. Terry.
Thank you. So some background information. The outline process for developing a transportation utility included the expectation by staff that the city would decide whether to proceed with utility once the model was developed or to not. Given that process, staff would be working either on special assessment work this time of the year or the development of the transportation utility. The decision by the Common Council to proceed with the transportation utility work to get it dialed in without approving the utility results in the necessity for the engineering department to do both. That department doesn't have the staff to continue working on project design, special assessments, and transportation utility development concurrently. Just to go through some of the special assessment work, because it involves both closing out existing projects and notices for future projects. Proposed assessment reports for 2021, that process typically starts in December in preparation for assessment hearings in the first 3 to 4 months of the upcoming year. There's typically about 100 hours of work required to get these projects through the assessment hearing and invoicing process, done primarily by the engineering technician and city engineer, while they are attending to other concurrent responsibilities. In the past several months, several preliminary resolutions have been approved. Typically, staff would prepare and send those preliminary notices with estimate assessment costs within a few weeks of approval, but those notices have not yet been sent because of the work on the transportation utility and our desire not to necessarily confuse anybody. The additional preliminary resolutions, there will be some additional preliminary resolutions for other 2022 projects, estimated around 40 hours worth of work. Again, this work's primarily done by the by an engineering technician and the city engineer during other concurrent responsibilities. If the transportation utility is approved, the department would no longer be inspecting concrete sidewalk or driveways on upcoming reconstruction projects. Right now, there's an inspection to determine if there's an assessment for replacing a piece of driveway apron. If that apron really has about 80% of its life left and the city is causing the project, they get credit for 80% of the replacement. So there's a process involved by the engineering department in surveying so that it's as fair as possible so that people that have replaced things are getting full value of it. We've started some inspections on Oak Street, but we have some more to do. It's about 60% complete. If we're going to focus on transportation utility work, we would hold off on those operations and we'd be able to assign other duties to our technicians. So our options available is to make a determination that prioritizes transportation utility work over special assessment work, prioritize special assessment work over transportation utility work, or work on them concurrently, knowing that a significant amount of staff time, effort, and resources would be wasted because at the end of the day, we're going to do one or the other. And if we do it concurrently, it's going to take some more time to get everything done. So I wasn't comfortable assigning staff to continue to do both, knowing that could potentially be wasting some time. But at the same time, really wanted to get a feeling from the committee and the Common Council for direction there, because if we do want to do them both at the same time, then we know what the city's goals are and we can move forward. So looking for kind of a direction based on one of those three options.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Delaney.
So my goal is to get rid of special assessments. I think that's everybody's goal completely. So if the transportation utility helps with that, or if it covers that completely, I would say let's continue on with the transportation utility and we can hold off on the special assessments, in my opinion.
Thank you. I think I'd echo that from Mr. Delaney. I believe our chips have been pushed in on the transportation utility at this time. I think it makes sense to move forward with the utility work and prioritize that over the special assessment work. If the utility doesn't end up passing, then we can re-up on the special assessment work and get that all in order. So with that, I'll make a motion to prioritize the transportation utility work over special assessment work.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, moving on. Consider approval of sewer lining contract to the lowest responsible bidder. Mr. Eichstead.
So the engineering department just opened bids recently for 11,760 lineal feet of sanitary sewer lining, primarily due to deteriorating pipe and reduction of infiltration and inflow. There were 3 bidders on the project. Visu Sewer was the low qualified bidder. Their bid was $407,618.50. Michael's was the second lowest, followed by Granite Inliner. And the city's engineering, or the engineer's estimate came in about $578,000. So definitely feel comfortable at the $407,000 mark with Visu Sewer, and we'd be looking for approval of Visu Sewer as the low qualified bidder in the amount of $407,618.50.
Thank you. Questions or comments by committee? Mr. Zacher.
So it's almost $200,000. It's almost a third of the cost difference. Are we getting? I mean, I'm assuming we went through all this, but this is the same bid
Yep.
for.
Yep, it is the same bid. Not sure what their specific criteria were. I mean, on 11,000 or almost 12,000 feet of pipe, varying sizes, you know, a few dollars difference in unit costs can add up significantly. In addition, I know that resins that they use in, I mean, just about any sort of manufacturing process, including sewer lining, depending on their sources and where they were getting it from, there were shortages for a period of time, and the amount of work that they may have scheduled in 2022 may also be a factor. We have worked with Visu Sewer before. We've worked with Michael's before. Granite Inliner, I'm not familiar with them, but you know, comfortable certainly with the other 2 companies.
Mr. Delaney.
You say that you've worked with them before, like a lot, or have they just done small projects? Have they done anything like this, like it's 2 miles long, so?
Yeah, Visu Sewer certainly has. I mean, they've won other sewer lining contracts for the city, and so the specifications have a certain, I can't remember how many thousands of feet that they needed to have lined, or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of feet as part of their experience record, but certainly they're qualified.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, what are the committee's wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve the Visu Sewer as the qualified low bidder and award the contract to them.
I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Moving on. Item number 9, review the DPW November activities report. Mr. Terry.
Thank you. Going to start out with kind of a sorrowful situation. The city of Wisconsin Rapids lost a valuable leader and public servant when wastewater superintendent Ryan Gieffer tragically passed away in early November. Ryan was hired by the city of Wisconsin Rapids in February of 2017 as the city's wastewater superintendent. Prior to Ryan's hiring, the plant suffered from poor performance due to challenging industrial waste loads. The city had consulted with its design engineers, had other consulting engineers provide recommendations, consulted with scientists for advice, and networked with other wastewater plants and plant operators with minimal success. Working with staff, Ryan worked tirelessly for solutions. He oversaw and performed laboratory analysis, textbook research, examination of internal report findings, visited other wastewater plants, and worked with staff to test a number of experimental modifications to the treatment process. Ryan augmented nutrient problems by negotiating with waste-producing manufacturers and increased plant revenues in the process. Ryan's collaborative approach with industrial customers created improved working relationships that resulted in more consistent flow and concentrations, and ultimately better treatment. Ryan and his staff, through operational initiatives of the energy recovery system, dramatically improved the plant energy production and decreased demand for natural gas and electricity, making the plant more cost-effective and environmentally friendly. In the summer of 2018, the fruits of Ryan's efforts demonstrated resounding success when he and his staff successfully modified the treatment process and plant treatment became more environmentally and economically efficient than it ever has been. In addition to the monumental improvements in plant process, in the nearly 4 years Ryan had been with the city, he oversaw a robust initiative to survey the condition and improve the functionality of the city's wastewater collection system. Ryan oversaw the design and replacement of a small residential lift station, as well as the national award-winning $7.28 million lift station and river crossing force main project. Ryan and his collection system maintenance staff initiated an accelerated televising schedule through efficiencies, updated televising equipment, and all while maintaining a responsible operating budget. In his time with the city, Ryan achieved an amazing level of success as a result of teamwork, diligence, and an extremely high level of competence and leadership. Ryan was a shining star in the wastewater industry and was well respected by me, his coworkers, employees, and professional peers. Ryan and his staff were professionally recognized in 2019, earning the Central States Water Environment Association prestigious Operator of the Year award. Ryan's fun-loving presence and candid demeanor fostered a great work environment. As amazing as his professional achievements were, his dedication as a husband and father were remarkable, and he exhibited the importance of a healthy work-life balance. An all-around great man, the city will miss Ryan as a public servant, colleague, mentor, leader, and friend. Ryan leaves behind a wonderful family, loving wife, and 3 young children, the youngest of which is only 3 weeks old. For anyone that's interested, there is a GoFundMe for Ryan and his family, and I would encourage anyone to consider helping out the family. It is truly a great tragedy. Some of the other highlights this month I've included in the report, and we'll get that report published online. It's not yet there. Some photographs of some of our projects, just to give everybody a feel for them. We are essentially done with everything. Our Grove project is done to assist with sewer and water for the quadplex. Our 15th Street North project was our first project that we did this spring. That's complete. Then we jumped over to Jefferson Street, over by 25th Avenue in the industrial park. That we added a cul-de-sac and resurfaced that road. It turned out really well. Then we jumped over to 11th Street from Washington to Apricot. Again, that project went really well. All these projects this year really were outstanding, especially considering that we had a new foreman and some new laborers in the trench with the pipe work. So just the coordination and effort by everybody was awesome. There's a photograph also of the Metalco rail spur project. It's partly complete and is currently underway. Got a photo there too of the 8th Street South cross culvert pipe project. That's the one that we jumped off of our 18th Avenue project to do those repairs because the bids came in at just under 400,000 and we expected them to be in the low 100,000, mid 100,000 range. Our 18th Avenue project was a booming success. We did not anticipate getting that done. When October 15th rolled around, we made some tough decisions to do partial removals, that the last couple blocks would be held as aggregate over the winter. We didn't want to take out any more driveways than we had to, so that the residents there weren't having to manage shoveling a gravel driveway, which meant a little bit more work for us in the spring. But again, the weather conditions and some excellent work from the staff and some luck being able to collaborate with our contractors for concrete and asphalt saw that project to fruition, so that one's done. We've also got a photo of our Daly Avenue project. That was mill and fill, and the second of that type of project. The city had been lacking kind of an intermediate program. We have our maintenance work and reconstruction work, but we've been lacking an intermediary surface replacement type program. And we started last year downtown with a mill and fill project, and this one, and it'll be part of the city's regular pavement and street replacement type or enhancement work. I suspect that over the next few years, we'll be doing probably at least a mile of this a year and start getting caught up. So that's excellent. In the absence of a wastewater superintendent, I've spent quite a bit of time assisting the wastewater department staff, working on organizing administrative projects, job assignments, some work with some property owners, and we demoed some interesting manhole technology, or some inspection technology wherein we would not have to send a person physically down into a confined space. And so pretty excited about the possibility of using that for both inspections for readying design for future reconstruction projects, as well as inspections that could help save some money when we submit manhole rehabilitation or relining for bid. Those contractors aren't necessarily fully aware of the condition of the manhole that they're going to be repairing. And so, they're going to be a little careful and make sure that they've got enough money in those bids to cover their costs and some unanticipated things, with the ability to take thousands of points. It's a point cloud, similar to architects using a laser point cloud in scanning a room. That it really shows all of the defects and issues with manholes very well, and would allow a contractor to have a really good feel for what they'd be getting into, and I believe, better pricing eventually for that work. So that was exciting. Also been working with them on the development of a formal inflow and infiltration reduction plan. There's many aspects of that, and that ends up being somewhat dynamic as we try to reduce our inflow and infiltration, ultimately to lower the amount of water that doesn't need to be treated running through the plant. And if we can lower that significantly in the next several years, it will mean less cost to meet our phosphorus limits. Some of those limits are going to be based on flow, and the lower the flow we can get, potentially the higher the percentage of phosphorus we could have in that wastewater and still meet those mass discharge limits. So it's, if we're successful, it could save the city a lot of money from unnecessary plant improvements. Transportation utility development. Utility data from Waterworks and Lighting has been obtained and passed on to the consultant. They've been working on mapping utility accounts to parcels. Parcels that have single utility accounts associated with a single parcel, which is the majority of the parcels in the city, are complete. Those are primarily the single-family parcels that were also easy to determine trips. Consultant has a good start on the multifamily properties and is partway through duplexes. There are over 700 of those with multiple accounts per parcel. And because some of those utility accounts are tied to a garage rather than a dwelling, it's cumbersome but necessary to go through them one by one to ensure accuracy. Once those are done, they'll have the multifamily parcels and multi-account commercial parcels to do. The multifamily isn't anticipated to take a lot of time, but the multi-account commercial parcels will need to be gone through one-on-one, likely with city staff assistance. We've had a fairly lengthy progress meeting via video conference. We involve the city assessor along with engineering staff that will likely be handling some of those assessments. And because the assessor has been in most of the buildings, some of the questions that we're going to have as far as use, he'll be able to answer. So I'm confident that we'll be able to proceed. The consultant is busy with several other utilities at the same time. So that work, he can't dedicate all of his time to the cities. He's got deadlines on some other projects, but it's moving along nicely. The rest of the report you all have in front of you, and for the viewing public, will get on the Public Works page of the website as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Thank you for the kind words regarding Ryan Gieffer. It's a tragic loss, and he will be greatly missed. So, moving on. Item number 10, referral list. Mr. Terry.
I think we can, although we do have some follow-up that the engineering department's going to do, so it's up to you if you want to scratch item number 5, or if you want it to remain on the list until that sign, the review of the signs and any further recommendations are presented. Okay, we'll leave that on the list. Item number 11 is parking, as well as 9. Those two items, in the next several days, the engineering department will have some reports that they will forward. So there'll be quite a bit of time for all the persons to review that. I'm proposing that we'll have that on the January agenda for discussion, but you should have just about a month with that information in hand. So if there are any questions, once you get that, please feel free to contact the engineering department, and hopefully any questions can be answered. So that'll eventually cover items number 9 and 11. Number 12, I think we can, well, that's going to stay on because that's being referred to next month. And number 13, I think that's a great idea. We haven't had time to focus on that one, but as soon as we do, we'll come up with some recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Okay, on to item number 11, adjournment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
We have a motion, second by Delaney. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Have a good evening, everyone.